You remember the little Jesus books that Concordia used to put out called Arch books? When my kids were little, loved those books. We read those books to them all the time. And as I read, I think practically every one they ever published, I noticed two things. One is that they cause a lot of confusion because in an effort to have pretty pictures and cute rhymes, they make stuff up. I mean, what kind of fruit did Adam and Eve eat in the Garden of Eden? We don't know. It could have been a kiwi for all we know. But somewhere, someone who was an illustrator decided that it should be an apple. And then forever after, children believe that Adam and Eve ate an apple in the garden. Or here's another one. How many magi were there who came to visit Jesus? We don't know. But somewhere an illustrator decided he was going to match up with the song, We Three Kings, and drew in three of them. And there ever after is what you got. 3 kings. It's really a lesser problem, I know. And it's just a little irritating when I have to spend so much time in confirmation undoing archbook theology. But it's not that big a deal. The bigger problem with archbooks, and with actually all of the little kid Jesus books, is they skip over all the really cool stories. Children so rarely hear of the awesome and raw power of our God because parents think it's just a little bit too scary. A friend of mine and I, he's a pastor out in California, we've joked about creating a rival children's book series to Arch Books. And these would be books still written on a child's level, but books that tell all of those stories of the raw power, the real theology of God. One of those books might be from our lesson for tonight, where we see Moses has just offered a sacrifice to God, obviously draining all the blood from the animals, and then he turns around and throws the bucket of blood on the people. And then, after that happens, God appears to the people as what we're told is a devouring fire. Well, I mean, that must have been pretty scary, don't you think? Being covered from head to toe in blood, and then facing a devouring fire. We're going to call our series Starch Books. And the promo is going to be, let's put a little more starch in our children. I know, parents, they want to protect their kids, I know. Everything frightening, but in so doing, we really do sometimes hide from them the awesome, raw, overwhelming power of God. And eventually, you know what? Those little kids are going to grow a little older. And eventually, things are going to go horribly awry, as they always will. So when that happens, when someone betrays us, when someone we love dies, when we have to face our own failures, we're going to need more than a sweet, happy baby Jesus laid in a little manger. We're going to need more than a happy Jesus riding into town on palm fronds, on Palm Sunday, sitting on a donkey. Folks, when things go south for us, we need that blood-splattering, fire-throwing, unstoppable, unfathomable God. And that's who we see in Exodus today. The Israelites were out in the wilderness, and Moses had just told them the 10 Commandments and all that the Lord required of his people. If they did what the Lord said, he would send an angel ahead of them who would conquer the people who were dwelling in the promised land. And the people responded that they would do everything that the Lord commanded them. And then to seal the deal, Moses offered sacrifices to God and threw half the blood on the altar and the other half of the blood on the people, thus connecting the people with God. Now think about that. You're standing before the altar of God, dripping in blood, having just heard the promise of salvation. That's a gory vision. But you and I stand before the altar of God week after week with a like kind of vision. Don't try to sanitize God. He is raw and he is gory. You and I stand before this altar week after week with the body of Christ that hung on the cross and the blood of Christ that dripped from his hands and from his feet in our mouths, having heard the promise of salvation. We are bathed in blood. For Moses, the blood was just symbolic. The blood was thrown on the altar and then thrown on the people, thus connecting the people to God. But there's a difference between Moses' people and us. For us, the blood is real. The blood that ran from Jesus' torn and beaten body flows into our mouths, thereby making us one with Jesus, one with the Father, and one with each other. I know it's gory, but it's also overwhelmingly powerful. It takes a little starch to be a Christian. We're told also in Exodus that God appeared to the people as a devouring fire. That's not a nice, sweet old man sitting on a puffy cloud. A devouring fire. When I was a little boy, the logging mill in our town caught fire during an unusually dry summer. And like small town people tend to do, we all drove out to the mill to see the fire. I, as a child, was not prepared to see anything as ghastly as that. That fire was all-consuming. People were screaming. Timbers were exploding. All the firefighters could do was dig a huge trench around the mill in hopes that they could avoid the town burning down. The heat from the fire burned your face from hundreds of yards away. The sounds of trees exploding before they began to burn reminded me of the reports we heard on the nightly news from Vietnam. Nothing I had ever seen prepared me for the devastation of the fire I saw that day. And I have always been very cautious about fire since that day. And then to think that logging mill fire was just a weak, flickering flame compared to the fire that the people of Israel saw that day as God revealed himself to them. That's why we burn palms from Palm Sunday, and why in just a few days we'll put ashes from those palms on our forehead. The palms from Palm Sunday welcomed our King into the city where our salvation would be accomplished. And the ashes of Ash Wednesday remind us that our King is a devouring fire. A fire that consumed and forgave all of our sin by shedding his very blood on that cross. And as our King once came, he will return for us soon, very soon. Blood and fire. They're harsh images, but they're also extremely comforting. To know that I am connected by blood to a God who is a devouring fire is powerful. See, I don't need another buddy in this life. I've got plenty of buddies. I don't need a kindly grandpa to bounce me on his knee and tell me everything will be okay when I know that he has no power to ensure that it would indeed be so. I need an all-knowing, all-powerful, ever-present God with whom I am connected by blood. A God who promises to walk with me, lifting me up and empowering me to do whatever it is he calls me to do. That's what I need. And that is exactly what we have. Don't be deceived by people who want to make God into something less so that we can comprehend him and so that we can control him. Our God is out of our control, beyond our understanding, and that is exactly what we need the most when our world shifts sideways.